Hello. I'm trying something different today, so hopefully this is not like an absolute disaster. I'm trying to go live on multiple platforms at one time. So we'll see how this goes. You never know. You just never know. So we shall see. How is everybody? So I have no real agenda today, to be totally honest. I'm just going to kind of be on here, answer questions that you guys might have in general. So just feel free to ask any questions related towards like healing from narcissistic abuse, or if you have questions about narcissistic abuse or my healing journey, any of that kind of stuff, just feel free to comment them and I will try to answer as many as possible. Really appreciate all your videos. Thank you. I love your videos. Been watching you for about a month now. I'm glad you have. I'm glad. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that the content is relatable because that means we went through something similar together. But I'm glad that the content's at least been helpful and hopefully validating for your experience too. And also, so I've had like a really bad like head cold upper respiratory infection for like literally on Tuesday it'll be 3 weeks. That's how long it's been. But I've got my supplies, got my cough drops, all that stuff. So if I like just ignore me if I like randomly start coughing or anything. Oh hi, hello over there in the UK. Sorry it's late over there. Thanks for tuning in though. So like I said, y'all, I don't have any real agenda. For today, just that I would hop on. I had a little bit of extra unexpected time today, so I thought I would just hop on and just see how everybody was. If y'all have any questions, this is a great time just to ask me any questions that you might have. I'll answer them the best to my ability. Hello, hello. Okay, so I have a question over here on TikTok. What exactly did you do to get through all of the abuse and how to process it? That's a really good question. So honestly, it was a real big journey. It's hard to just kind of give like a one answer of how did I get through it all. It was a process. It was a process of taking small steps to reclaim my life and to start incorporating things that were meaningful to me back into my life, starting to spend more quality time with my friends, quality time with family, and really trying to understand what had happened to me. Because while I was in the relationship, if I'm honest, I had no idea what I really was going through. Like I never considered it an abusive relationship because there was never physical abuse. Well, to the point where it was like, where I was hit or anything like that. Like stuff was thrown around and, you know, holes punched in the wall and all that, which that is physical abuse. But at the time, I didn't equate any of that. So it wasn't until probably over a month after I had left that I had even realized I had been in an abusive relationship. And that was a very painful realization. Um, so honestly, I spent a lot of time just kind of trying to get back to functioning. I was I was so distraught, kind of realizing everything that had happened, and I was finding out all the stuff that had happened behind the scenes, like the cheating and all of that kind of stuff. So it took me a while just to feel functioning again. Um, I did end up writing a course that goes really into detail about everything that I did, because the hardest part was just getting strategies and just knowing what to do. Like not I was going to therapy every week and I had supportive friends, supportive family and all of that, but just actually knowing what to physically do, like with my time on a day-to-day basis, that was the hard part. So I ended up writing a course about it. It is called Breaking Free from Rumination, and it's all about how to reclaim peace and clarity after narcissism. You can find that in the link in my bio. It's 6 weeks. It's self-paced. It literally breaks you down helps explain things, gives you strategies, things to do, things to focus on. Um, and it's the resource that I wish that I had had during that time, for sure. But ultimately, the one thing that everybody can start doing, no matter where you are in your healing journey, is just reincorporating things that are important to you and reincorporating meaningful activities, for sure. I finally wrote down my list of all the things he did to me. It was a struggle, but very eye opening. I procrastinated doing it because I didn't want to relive those experiences. That's a So if y'all have seen any of my videos, or you can talk to, you know, ask any of my clients, I tell everybody to do this, and that is to write down some of the experiences that happened to you, because, and it's not to do it in a way that it like keeps you stuck with where you were. Like, that's not the purpose of it. And it's not, the purpose is not to relive. What the purpose of making that list is it helps you understand what actually happened to you and help bring reality back into the situation, because it's very, very common for us after we get out of these emotionally abusive relationships to question our reality, to question if we were the problem, to question if we were actually the narcissistic person, and maybe even feel guilty about some of the reactions that we had. All of this is very normal, and we all go through this stage. So when you make this list, what it does is it reminds you of what actually happened to you. And that way, when you get to these places of you're tempted to break your no contact, or you are wondering whether or not you were the problem, like all these things that I just said, you can go back to this list and be like, no, my experience was very real. It's not that I was being overly sensitive. It's that I was constantly being told it was my fault. It's not that I had an attitude problem. It's that I was just getting fed up by all of this stuff. And I think it's a really, really important step to take, so that way you have that on paper. Get specific with it. Don't try to do it all in one sitting, because, just like you said, it can be a little painful to relive some of this stuff. So do it for a little bit, take a break, come back to it, so on and so forth. But it's important to make that list, in my opinion. It helped me a ton. I'm struggling putting words into what he does. Did you experience that? In a way, because the only word that I could really come up with was that it felt very violating, felt very unjust. And when you don't have like these receipts, like when it comes to physical abuse, there's receipts. You see the bruises, there's all of that. But when you just know that something's off, and you know that you're being manipulated, it is kind of hard to put into words what they do. And that's why it can be very hard for people to understand this. It's really hard unless you've actually lived through it. That's a good question. I find the emotional dysregulation really hard to manage during no contact. I wrote my list and it shocked me. I had no idea what was happening, even though friends told me that my partner was toxic. So emotional dysregulation, I don't think people realize how common that is after you leave. And the reason why is because it's actually, so for those of you guys that don't know, I'm getting my doctorate in occupational therapy, and mental health has fallen that framework of practice. And this last semester, we were talking a lot about trauma and just what happens after you go through trauma. And emotional dysregulation is one of like the most common things that you see from people after trauma. But emotional dysregulation can actually happen a lot in the relationship too. And here's why it can happen in the relationship. In the relationship, you're constantly under stress. Like, whether you realize it or not, you're constantly in this state of anxiety, whether it's walking on eggshells, whether it's wondering what version of them is going to come home, whether it's, is there going to be a fight when I'm cooking dinner this time? Like, for some reason, there's a lot that can happen around cooking. It's just not good enough for this or that. There's always kind of like this preparation for a fight to happen. So it's almost like your new baseline and your new normal level of functioning. If you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like you're constantly operating at like a 6 or a 7. You're always on edge. So something can happen like let's say your child like spills their milk or something like that. Normally, an event like that would maybe be like a 2 or 3 on that scale. But because you're operating at a 6 or 7, something small like that can kind of send you over the edge because of what you're baseline operating at. And this carries over after the relationship because you can stay on this constant state of like paranoia. If you're in contact with them, it can be even worse if you're in contact with them because every time because I was still in contact with him for a couple months, probably like 4 or 5. And it was like every time I had a conversation with him, I would have this like anxiety response in my body because I knew what the conversation could turn to on just like the flip, like a, oh my gosh, my words, like a flip of a switch. That what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So even like the good conversations, I still had this anxiety attached for it or a response to it. It's very, very common. But sometimes we can get emotionally dysregulated after trauma because we're kind of ignoring the pain that's happening after the relationship because there's a lot of painful acceptance that happens after you're done. And we can kind of push some of that off or kind of ignore it for a little bit because either A, we don't want to deal with it, or B, we make an excuse of, well, I shouldn't miss this person because they were horrible. And we kind of like try to dismiss our own feelings sometimes on accident. And it's kind of like the same concept of, you know, if you tell someone don't think of a purple elephant, they're going to think of a purple elephant. But when you keep trying to like suppress this over and over again, I shouldn't feel it. It keeps it's wanting to be processed. So it keeps trying to pull itself back up into the forefront so that way you can process it. In my course, there's actually a whole week and a whole lesson that's strictly for managing emotions because it is such a common problem. So if that is something that you feel like you're struggling with, please consider getting the course. Again, it's called Breaking Free from Rumination. It's in the link in my bio. And it goes through, I think it gives you like 10 different tactics on how you can start learning to manage the emotions. One that worked really well for me that I'll tell you guys now is I would actually make a deal with myself. So I would tell myself, like if I was really struggling, feeling sad, or if I was angry, whatever it might be, I would actually tell myself, I'm going to sit in this feeling for 20 minutes and I'm going to allow myself to feel it for this amount of time. Once this 20 minutes is done, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go do something productive. And what's interesting is when you allow yourself to just feel it, it actually lowers the intensity of it. So I would probably say over half the time, I didn't even need that full 20 minutes. I just needed to give myself permission to feel it. Sometimes there were a couple occasions where I was really, really heavy and I needed more than the 20 minutes. So I would just set another 10-minute timer. Like I would literally set a timer on my phone and give myself however long I said I would, and then get up and go redirect myself so that I didn't sit there and dwell in it. That worked really well for me. And then also journaling. I journaled every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I usually did it at night so that I could kind of process anything that maybe came up during the day so I didn't carry it over into the next day. So try those 2 out. And like I said, in the course, there's a whole bunch more, but those are 2 that worked really well for me. And thank you for sharing that because I understand how difficult that is. Yes, it's always so violating and so many lies every day. Yeah, it is. I think the hardest part for me was just realizing that I remember saying to my friends, I'm realizing that he's nothing that I thought that he was, and he's everything that I was afraid that he was. That was a really painful realization because they just lie about about stupid stuff, like not even the big things. Like, am I lying about whose name his car was registered under? Like, why are you lying about that? It ain't that deep, bro. Like, it's not that deep. Or lying about what happened at work, or just you question everything. Like, especially once you start to see it, it makes you question everything, which I think is probably why we also start questioning our own reality a lot because we get into this mental habit of questioning ourselves all the time. Someone asks, how do I start journaling? Where do I even begin? Honestly, so in the link in my bio, there's a bunch of journals that I can recommend. And they can be, some are prompted, like they ask you questions and all of that. But I didn't do a prompted journal. I just sat down and wrote. I just wrote whatever was on my brain. I was having a really hard time with insomnia, like like just being able to fall asleep. I just could not shut my brain off, which is actually another very common side effect of trauma and PTSD. Um, and to me, journaling, I called it a brain dump. Like I would just, everything that was going on in my brain, I felt like I would just dump it on a piece of paper. So I can just, and it was very therapeutic because it allowed me to just process what was going on in my brain. So sometimes, um, you don't even necessarily, sometimes I would sit down with my journal and have no clue what I was going to write about that day, like none. Um, but I just sat down and I just started. And some days I would write a paragraph. Some days I would write pages. Some days I was journaling multiple times a day. Um, I didn't really have an agenda. So if you want to do just kind of like this open freehand journaling, I just start with the question, how did today go? Like what went well today? What do I what did I struggle with today? You can just kind of just reflect on the day as a whole, and just start there. But like I said, the link in my bio has a couple of journals that are in there too that can that guide and ask questions and all of that too. Hi, Elena. I miss you too. Was your last relationship the first one with a narcissist? So my previous relationship before my fiance, obviously, that was my first one with a romantic partner. It was not my first encounter with a narcissistic person. I just did not know it at the time. I didn't know anything about this until after my romantic relationship. But once I started to learn about it in order to heal from the romantic relationship, I realized that I'd actually dealt with this kind of situation in several other aspects of my life. So I had dealt with it in mostly work environments. I thought that toxic work environments were actually normal because that's really all that I had known. I had two very, very influential mentors in my life that now I know were extremely narcissistic. And it makes sense now because when I left one of those jobs, I remember telling my family, I really feel like I just left an emotionally abusive relationship. Like I was that exhausted from it. My identity had been that robbed from it. There was a lot of things that I really had to detox from. Like they made me feel like if I didn't stay at that job, I would never be successful at anything else in my life. That boss, she actually told me one time that I had not earned the right to rest, that I can rest when I've accomplished all my goals. So that created a very unhealthy relationship to just rest. Like I feel guilty anytime that I just take me time or to take care of myself. Not nearly as bad as I used to, but it was really, really bad for a while. And I would burn out all the time because of that. There was someone in my family, not my parents, but there's been members of my family that are that way. So when I realized that I had dealt with this on several different occasions, it was kind of like, well, no wonder that I have struggled for so long in my young adult life. But my ex was the only romantic relationship, and we were together for about 18 months. And we lived together for 10 of those. Insomnia. I thought I was the only one. Nope, you are definitely not the only one that deals with insomnia. It's actually very, very common. I started taking melatonin, which helped a lot, because it just got to the point where I like could not sleep. So I did have to start taking something for a little while to help. It was awful. I would love to stop feeling crazy. Does that go away, or will I always be battling with that? No, you won't. You won't always be battling with that. But one of the things that I talk about in my course, my Breaking Free from Rumination course, is that ruminating, like this whole ruminating and obsessive thinking cycle, it's essentially nothing more than a bad habit. Like, and it's a habit that was formed during the relationship because this whole being on edge and constantly wondering what's going on, what version of them's coming home, like all of that is a form of rumination, because the clinical definition of ruminating is just a negative thought pattern that is constantly on replay, on repeat in your brain. Obviously, that's not the exact definition, but that's essentially what it is. The exact definition's in my course. But that's what was going on in the relationship. So we developed this really unhealthy mental habit during the relationship. So when you leave or you get discarded, that's not a strong enough stimulus to stop this bad habit. So what happens is that it transfers. So now what maybe you're thinking about is, what are they doing now? Who are they doing it with? What story are they telling? What's the demonizing story about me? You might be stalking their social media. You might be stalking the new supply social media. Like, there's a lot of different things that could be going on. And the emotional dysregulation, all of this kind of ties in together. And just like any other bad habit, it doesn't just go away on its own. You don't necessarily break a bad habit. What you usually end up doing is replacing it with a healthy habit. And that's why I wrote my course, is because nobody really teaches you how to do that. And even when you go to therapy, it's great because you can talk some things out. But the one thing that I was wishing that therapy was giving me more of was strategies. I just wanted to know what to do. Like, what do I do on a day-to-day basis? What do I do when I'm tempted to stalk his social media again? What do I do when I'm tempted to break my no contact, or even just not respond to text message? I wasn't even no contact yet. But I just needed strategies on what to do. And I had to figure it out all by myself. And I was just trying anything just to get myself distracted and redirected, and distracted in a healthy way. There was a period of time where I was distracted in a not healthy way, and I just ended up exhausting myself. So it goes away, but it doesn't necessarily go away on its own. You need a plan, and you need those strategies, and you need to know how to redirect yourself. So again, if you are struggling with this emotional dysregulation, if you're struggling with the obsessive thinking, or just, feeling crazy, please look at the course. It's Breaking Free from Rumination. It's all about reclaiming peace and clarity after narcissistic abuse. Just go to the link in my bio. The information is in there. It is the resource that I wish that I had at the time. 100%. Sorry, I've got questions coming in from multiple platforms, so I'm just trying to catch one as they come in. Is it normal for corporate grooming to affect your personal relationships? That's a good question. Yes, I 100% would say yes, because part of the problem with corporate grooming is it can really shift the dynamics of what your priorities are. So okay, for example, in my really, really bad one, I was there for 3 years. I did very well at this job. It was a financial advising job that I had. And it was the textbook definition of corporate grooming. When I first started, I made it very clear, I was married at the time, not to my narcissistic ex, to my kid's mom. That was not a narcissistic relationship at all. But I was married to my kid's mom at the time. My kids were really young, and it was very important to me that I was a present dad. I didn't want to be at work all of the time. And so I brought that up in the interview and this and that. The first month that I was there was this big event that was going on, and it happened to be, sorry, my dog's trying to make an appearance. It happened to be the same weekend that my son's birthday was on. And so I was just look, I can't go to this event, blah, blah, blah. My mentor was very understanding. It was oh, absolutely. You can make the next one and this and that. What I found out later was she told one of the other leaders in the company that had asked if I was going. My mentor said, no, he's not. He doesn't get it yet. He's still new. So it's it started, she started with this whole oh, we totally understand, we totally support. But then as I started to grow in the company and started to become a leader in the organization, it started to shift of well, you can't miss these events. You're a leader. What would your team think? And this and that. And you start being guilted. And she'll say things well, I'm trying to think of some specific. Sorry, I haven't thought about some of this stuff in a long time, so I'm trying to put myself back in there for a minute. Um, she would just say things like, "Sacrifice now so you can live the life that you want to later. So go to this event this now, and then you can do all this great stuff for your kids later." That can be kind of a manipulative statement, especially because when your kids are young, those are very formative years when it comes to the bond that they create with you. And so I was almost like guilted, and I felt like I wasn't going to do well at my job, or I was going to be a bad leader, or I was going to be this if I didn't go to this event. And it caused a very huge strain on all of my personal relationships because I was constantly being manipulated to put work first. And then when would bring some of this up, it was like, well, you just don't want it bad enough, like at work. I'm just like, it has nothing to do with that. Like I have no balance. I mean, I was working 50 to 60 hours a week on repeat, never having days off. Sunday was a day that I never really liked working because that was supposed to be our family day. I ended up working Sundays all the time. It was just a mess. So it's a very, very long-winded answer to yes, I do believe corporate grooming affects your personal relationships. Y'all have never been on a live with me before. I can get a little rambly. I'm sorry. Yeah, so my mentor, the two business mentors actually, non-stereotypically, were both women. Most of the narcissistic people that I've dealt with in my life have actually been women. My ex was a male, but most of them have actually been women. Hang on one second. I'm sorry. Duchess, come on. My dog is being obnoxious per the usual. Duchess, come on. Good girl. Thank you. Ugh. 1 second, y'all. I'm sorry. Settle down. Go ahead. Is it normal to feel angry all the time and not just hold on, I'm sorry. Is it normal to feel angry all of the time and not just be yourself? Absolutely. Um, it absolutely can. And if you think about it, the anger that you're dealing with after these kind of relationships is very just. Like it's justified anger. And what you have to find a way to do is you have to find a way to let go of the actions. It was very easy for me to get over my narcissistic ex as a person. It was really hard to let go of what he did to me. The actions were the hard part because the actions were so unjust. Again, it's really hard to get. It's really hard to get justice for any kind of like emotional abuse. Really, like it's just hard because you don't have receipts for it. But the anger that you feel is very justified. So it is very normal. And the thing about letting go about the actions that they did is it's not about excusing their behaviors or saying that their behaviors were okay. It's simply just about not allowing their actions to continue to hold weight in your life. And yes, I know that's a lot easier said than done. It's not even necessarily about forgiveness because I never tell people, oh yeah, you need to forgive your abuser. I don't think that's accurate. But I do think of letting go of the pain that their actions have put on you. I do think that's necessary for sure. I can get a little rambly, me after talking to whatever. Yeah, I have like 14 thoughts that go on at all times. And that's why I'm trying to make myself go live more often. If y'all been on live, I say that like every time because lives for me, I don't get anxious about them, but I can't plan them. I'm kind of a control person. So if I'm like doing a video, I can hit stop and redo it and all of that. But in lives, I kind of have to think on my feet and I can get a little rambly. So sorry. What should I do when people tell me about the new supply? Should I just ignore it? Ooh, that's a good question. So, okay. I had some friends who were 100% my support system. Like they were trying to kind of like be supportive for me. Okay. But they would give me updates. And it was very frustrating. And at first, I didn't say anything to them because I knew they weren't giving me updates to like cause me pain. It was kind of more of like, can you believe this? Like, it was definitely very much on, they were on my side. Um, but it would kind of start this whole obsessive thinking thing again. And it would kind of trigger my ruminating thought patterns when I would hear about it. And it would make me tempted to want to unblock them and see it for myself and like all of that. So here's what I ended up doing. Especially if you know they're not trying to cause you harm, like they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, whatever. I would just tell them, like, look, if you want to stay, this is exactly what I told my friends. If you want to stay on social media with them so you can watch the circus for yourself, then by all means, go for it. I'm not going to tell you who you can and can't be friends with on social media. It's not my place. However, I just don't want to know anything. Like, I'm trying to focus on my own healing. I'm trying to do what I need to do. And I just don't need to know. I don't need to know the good. I don't need to know the bad. I don't need to know anything. So if you can just please not give me updates unless I ask for them. And they honored it. But if they didn't honor it, then I would have had to distance myself from that because it wasn't doing me any good at all. So don't be afraid to make that request. And it's not even necessarily about setting a boundary with your friend. It's about setting a boundary within yourself. Like, your own boundary is, I can't know what's going on in their life. So in order to honor the boundary for yourself, you just make this request. Like, you know what? I really just don't need to know about this. I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I know your intentions are well. I just don't need to know. So that's how I handled it. And fortunately, my friends just respected me enough that they did, or else I would have had to kind of distance myself a little bit. That's a really good question. Now, if they're doing it in a sense of like where they're trying to like be vindictive towards you, then I would question if they're friends or not. Because friends don't do that. Good question, though. And social media is just a tricky thing in general. And we have to also remember another reason why we really don't need to look at their social media at all or have people tell us what's going on is they're going to act, especially on social media. This isn't for everyone. Nothing that I ever say is like, oh, this happens all the time with every narcissist or toxic person. But very, very often, they're going to put this front on social media that they are living this like great life without you and all of that. They're going to do all of the things that they wouldn't do with you, with this new person and all of that. They live their life as though you were watching at the beginning. So it's very, very important not to watch. Did you go no contact? I did go no contact. It took me a while. I kind of had to progress into no contact, but I did. It took me about 4 or 5 months. And honestly, I was told from the get-go, like from my therapist and friends and family around me, that I needed to block him. I made all the excuses in the world, like, oh well, he owes me money, and he's paying me, and oh, I feel like that's mean, and all of that. I was avoiding it because I didn't want to give him an excuse to talk bad about me, but he was doing that either way. And honestly, my whole concept of self and like my life in general was still very wrapped up in him, and I was still trauma bonded. So I couldn't really imagine myself not being in contact with him. So it did take me a while. I'm actually about to post a video about this, but essentially I just progressed to it. So like I would say, okay, I'm not going to respond to his text messages for an hour. So if he texts me, I would set a timer for an hour. I would die that whole time during the hour. At the first couple days I was doing it because I was conditioned to respond to him right away. And then once I got better with that, then then it was okay. I'm not going to call him back. I will just text him back later. And so then I cut off, like, I don't want to talk to him on the phone anymore. So I had to progress into it. Could you DM your coaching prices? If you actually want to, the link in my bio has all of my coaching information. I think there's a link that says like, see all my coaching options here, because I have a bunch of different options. So if you just go straight to that, it takes you to all of them. There's like there's 45-minute, there's a 90-minute, there's a bunch. So that would actually probably be a little bit easier for you. is just looking through it there. Thank you for asking about that. Sorry, I'm just reading comments really fast. Give me a second. All right, so I'm finding it difficult lately because I had to stay in contact with my abuser as they emotionally blackmailed me over my daughter. Ugh, that's awful. I knew their power would be cut once my daughter was old enough and could see the abuse. She sees it now, and now I'm able to protect us, but I'm genuinely sad that she had to see it, and I'm not relieved like I expected. Wow, that's heavy. Um, I think I would probably, what I would do with that situation is I would ask, maybe ask what the source of why am I not feeling relief from this? And I think as a parent, I think it makes total sense about the grief. Like, I'm sad that my daughter had to see this. Like, I that makes total sense to me. And it could just be that that's where you're at in the journey right now. Is that you're in mom mode and you're in kind of protective mom mode that my daughter had to witness this or my daughter had to go through this. So I wouldn't even necessarily get too wrapped up on why you don't feel the relief yet, because maybe you're just having to deal with that portion of it first. Um, and there could be some parent guilt that's associated with that. I would explore more that route because maybe that's just what you're having to deal with in the moment. And then obviously, judging by your comment, I'm sure you're already doing this, but just continue to be that emotional support system, validate her, validate her experience. Don't always try to fix everything. It's really hard to do that as parents, but sometimes they just need, I like to ask the questions with, in general, I've had to learn how to ask this question. Do you need advice or do you just need me to listen? And that's a very powerful question because sometimes we can accidentally go a route that we're not supposed to be going. Um, and that's what it kind of sounds like to me, is that maybe you're just a little bit in mom mode, which is why you haven't felt that relief yet. Thank you for sharing that with me. Do narcissists come back when you achieve your goals? Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't try to do that if they still felt like they had some sort of chance or some sort of in. Because if you think about it, a lot of it has to do with what they can get out of you. Sometimes it's not always about money, and it's not always about convenience. Sometimes it's about image. You know, I was going through a divorce when I met my narcissistic ex. I was kind of in a little bit of a financial wreck. Not wreck, I shouldn't say that. That's actually really dramatic. But I definitely was not a sugar daddy in any aspect. But what I offered my narcissistic ex was image. You know, I had the kids, I had the house, I had the dog and the white picket fence and all of that. And I remember him specifically saying it was almost kind of like this, well, I'll show them kind of thing, because he had had supposedly people in his life that said that he could never accomplish any of that, which he probably can't unless he makes some big massive changes. So it was kind of like it was like his way to stick it to these people. I think he definitely loved the image that he was able to create by being with me a lot more than he loved me. That's for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised about it. It is all about the supply, and it's 100% a hoovering attempt. And it's funny because when you're in the relationship with them, they don't want you accomplishing their goals or your goals, and they don't want you accomplishing like leveling up, because that means like you're moving away from them usually, or you can, because you can start being more independent. So it is just kind of funny how like they'll act like that in the relationship, but then you know, oh, you go out and reach them. Let me try again. All right, guys, I have about 20 more minutes before I have to start getting dinner ready. So if you guys have any other questions, or if y'all need any ideas for like resources, or if y'all need self-care tips, book recommendations, all of that stuff, let me know. If you're having trouble finding the bio on TikTok, so just go to my profile. I think you'll have to. It'll actually take you out of my live. So just click on like my image icon, and it'll take you to like my page with all my videos and stuff. And it's just that little. You'll see the link underneath like my username, and that's where it is. It's not like some of the other platforms where it has like an official bio. It's just kind of like a little description underneath it. I'm about to leave my narcissist main suggestions for recovery. Hi. Main suggestions for recovery is do not ignore emotions. We kind of talked about that earlier. Don't block them off. Just let them come. Set a date with yourself, like every day, to just check in. Check in with yourself. Ask yourself how you're feeling, whether it's negative or whether it's positive, and just giving yourself permission to grieve. I think a lot of times we just don't realize that we're grieving, and we can confuse a lot of the grief that we are feeling for things like I miss them, or that's what I was doing. It's I thought I missed him, but really I just missed having a partner. So understand that it's okay to have these times where you feel like lonely and that you just miss having someone, but that doesn't mean that they're the right someone to fill that void for you. Um, and don't be afraid of being alone. Alone just means that nobody's there, but being lonely is when you realize that the person that should be for you is actually against you. And to me, the loneliest I ever felt was that relationship. Um, I actually learned to be okay with being alone. And then, ironically, a month after I was okay with that, I met my fiance. But don't be afraid of just being alone, and that's okay. Being alone's great because it allows you to be in your own thoughts and to sit in that. And yeah, that would be my main advice, or my first little tidbit of advice. I love watching your videos as a fellow survivor. I can relate to you so much. Well, first, I'm sorry that you can relate because that means we have that shared experience. But I appreciate that a lot. Bree from Abuse is Abuse told me about you. Oh, I love Bree. And you have yes, I do have a rumination course. It's called Breaking Free from Rumination. It's how to reclaim peace and clarity after narcissism. If you go to like my bio in any of my platforms, there's a link that says like beacons. It's called a beacons link. You click on that, and it's one of the first things that are on there. And it's 6 weeks. It's self-paced, and sorry, I got distracted. It's self-paced, so like when you open up one lesson, the next week's lesson won't open for 5 days. So you can't speed up the course, but you can take as long as you want to. But yeah, it's in there. It gives you strategies. There's worksheets, there's videos, there's all that stuff. It is literally the exact same thing that I wish that I had during that time. You're one of the most helpful channels. Thank you. That's extremely kind. Especially there's so many people that are in this niche. So I really appreciate that. I listen to your yellow mug talks, and I feel like you're talking to me. Yeah, the yellow mug talks is probably like my favorite series that I do. I have a couple. I have like the Narcissistic Hotline. I haven't made one of those in a while. I need to do that again. The Mind of the Narc. That was my first ever little mini series that I did. And then, oh, I don't have a date, so I probably shouldn't even be talking about this, but I'm going to go and tell you anyways. So I've had a lot of people been asking me, speaking of yellow mug talks, I've had a lot of people ask for me to start selling like mugs and like yellow mug talk merch. It is coming probably this month. The designs are done. I just made an order myself so I could see and make sure that they all look good, like in person. So it is coming. I'm hoping that it will be officially launched like I shouldn't even say a date. By the end of this month, I'm hoping that it will be launched. So I'm very, very excited about that. Does the course help with breaking the trauma bond? Yes. So when you're stuck in this rumination pattern, to me, that is a sign that you're still trauma bonded to the person. I'm calling it, like, I call it breaking free from rumination because that's mainly the big focus of it. However, um, this 6 weeks that I did, like the 6 weeks of work, why are you whining? Gosh, she's so obnoxious when she wants to be. Go forth and prosper. Sorry. I got really distracted. Yes. So it was the 6 weeks that I did. When I did all of this work in that 6 weeks, I actually went no contact after that. So like this work helped me go no contact. It helped me break my trauma bond. It helped me realize, it helped me reach radical acceptance. Like there's so many things that this work ended up doing for me. But the one that was the most debilitating, like the symptom, the side effect, that was the hardest for me to get over was this obsessive thinking cycle. Because as it's kind of like it would, I would figure one thing out and I would answer one question and it would lead to like 6 more questions. I don't know if anybody relates to that or not. So yes, the course would absolutely help breaking a trauma bond. It is what I did to break my trauma bond. So again, it's called Breaking Free from Rumination. Go to the link that's in my bio. It's the Beacons link. It goes to all my resources, and my course is one of the top 3 or top things that's listed. The narcissistic hotline is how I found you. It was hilarious. Thank you. I need to make more of those again. I need to do those again. They're kind of fun to make. I really should. Okay, now you're convicting me. I feel convicted. I will make more hotline videos. Now I have to do it because I just told y'all I would on a live. How do you get over the shame of things that you did because of the broken down place that you were being with them? Okay, I'm gonna say that again because that's a really good question. So how do you get over the shame of the things that you did because of just being broken down in this relationship? So I said earlier, I'm never going to tell people that they need to forgive their abuser. I do 100% think that forgiving yourself is 100% necessary because there's a lot of things that we hold on to. We hold on to the fact like we get mad at ourselves for even getting in this relationship to begin with. We get mad at ourselves for staying as long as we did. Like we get mad at ourselves about a lot of things. Maybe there was some like moments of reaction that we had. I was actually just talking to a client earlier today. Like there were, there's things that you end up doing that are just so uncharacteristic of who you are or who you have been. And it's because human beings can only take so much. Like you can only take so much of always being told it's your fault. You can only take so much of being lied to and being manipulated or being cheated on or, you know, being screamed at for essentially nothing. You can only take so much. One thing that's really helpful is to actually, okay, let's say that you flipped out one time and, started yelling at them or whatever. Go back in that moment and ask yourself, like, what was going on? Like, what led up to that event and figure out the story that was happening behind the action that you did or whatever it may be. Because when you can understand the pressure that you were going through, if you can understand the drama, if you can understand all of the abuse that you were going through, I understand it doesn't necessarily make our actions okay, but it helps us understand why we had this reactive response, And when you can do that and understand the story, then you can start changing the language to yourself of, well, maybe I'm the crazy one. Well, no, it's not that you were crazy. It's that you were being constantly gaslit. You were constantly being told it's your fault. You can tell the story again in a way that makes you understand why you felt the way that you did. And then that can help you actually start to forgive yourself and understand, like, okay, this is why. It's just further evidence that this person was not actually for me and not the right person for me, because reality of the situation is whoever you are with and whoever you are in a relationship with should be bringing the best out in you, not the worst. So if you're constantly being pushed into this other, like this place of just like you're being driven crazy, that's just narcissistic or not, that's just toxic. And it's not the right relationship for you. Doesn't necessarily make that actions okay. No. But once you understand it, then you can move towards forgiving yourself of, you know what? Now I know what happens to me in this kind of relationship. Now I know what happens to me when I ignore my gut, when I ignore the red flags, and I don't want to do this again. And then you just learn from it and try to do better next time. What I wouldn't do, I've had clients do this, like one or two, and I discourage it every time. And there's reasons I do. Oh my gosh, my animals are driving me nuts. I'm being ridiculous today. You don't need to call them and say that you're sorry. If they truly were narcissistic and toxic, I'm just saying that's going to set you up. You can forgive yourself without asking them for forgiveness. That's just me. Okay, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up tonight. Thank y'all for dealing with my divided attention tonight. My animals have been a little crazy, and I'm also live on 3 platforms at one time. So I'm trying something different today. So I appreciate you guys hopping on and asking questions today. Just a reminder of some resources that I've got. Like I mentioned, I do have the course. One option that I have that I'm really, really enjoying is Dr. Carrie McAvoy and I, which if you're not following Dr. Carrie McAvoy, please make sure you are. She and I are actually doing a group coaching session. It's 6 weeks. It's very focused on strategy building and what to do and techniques of how to calm your nervous system down and emotional regulation, how to find closure. It's 6 weeks of skill building. So it's not like support group, it's like skill building type stuff. We have that, and that's actually starting on March 4th. The registration for that, again, everything I'm about to talk about, it's on the link in my bio. But we do have that coming up on March 4th. Carrie is awesome. Like Dr. Carrie McAvoy and I, we kind of have a good balance because she has like that talk therapy history. And then I'm in OT school, which is very strategy building and occupational therapy. So we balance each other really well. With that, we're only taking a max of 15 people because we kind of like to keep the group small. So we have that coming up on March 4th. My course is in there, 101 coaching. There's a newsletter that I do every month. It's free. I'm never going to charge for the newsletter. It gives you things for self-care tips. I always highlight a different creator and have them give a book recommendation. You can sign up for that in there as well too. Lots of stuff in there, book recommendations, all of that. And I say this every time, and I mean this every single time. I am so truly honored for all the support that you guys give me. I'm very honored to be a part of your healing journey and to help validate you and to help give some understanding to your experience and for you to know that you're not alone, that you're not an isolated person to this situation. And even if the only thing you do is just watch my videos, it is truly an honor for me to be able to validate and to help and to educate and help you build the life that you've always deserved, because you've always deserved more than what they gave you. And never forget that. And never internalize their actions as a lack of your own self-worth. You could have been completely perfect partner or the perfect daughter, perfect whatever the relationship dynamic is. They still would have done it because it's just who they are. It is not a reflection on you or your lack of worth. It's just a reflection on who they are. So please keep that in mind as you go through this week. Thank you again for all of your support. Make sure you're following me on all the platforms that we have, and be on the lookout for the Yellow Mug Talk merch. I really shouldn't have talked about that yet, but I did anyways. And I will make more hotline videos. Sorry, I'll make them. All right, y'all. Have a great evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be live again next week, and we'll talk soon. Bye, y'all.